We like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we give you first an actual definition, which we love to poke fun of, quite frankly. And then we give you a working definition, which I love to say makes the BCBAs break out into hives because it's not as exact. It may be not perfect, but it's enough for us to get a beginning understanding of, oh, that's what that means. And let's face it, you know, this is tough. The jargon is tough, but when you begin to learn it a little bit at a time and you take it on and you begin to understand it, it saves you time and money. And I'm all about saving time and money because that means you get more progress quicker. And you have more money to do more things, okay? So somebody wrote in and requested this jargon. And by the way, I love it when you request jargon because we've been doing this for a while and sometimes I'll repeat terms and I'm never quite sure what I want to be helpful, right? So I don't know which other jargon terms would be helpful. And somebody wrote in and said, hey, could you please do baseline? And I thought, my goodness, have we never done baseline? That's crazy. We should do baseline because it's one of those confusing words. You're going to hear it all the time and you think, well, I know what a baseline is. I'm just not 100% sure I know exactly what it means when it's an autism practitioner talking about my kid, right? And those are the slippery ones. Okay, so let's talk about baseline. Let's look at our actual definition. Oh, it's such a good one. Let's make big fun of it, shall we? Okay, baseline, a condition of an experiment in which the independent variable is not present. Data obtained during baseline are the basis for determining the effects of the independent variable. A baseline measurement creates control condition that does not necessarily mean the absence of instruction or treatment, only the absence of a specific independent variable of experimental interest. Shall we all run screaming into the streets with our hair on fire? What? What? I mean, I know what a baseline is and I'm like, it hurts my head. It hurts my head a lot. Okay. And you know, we can pick it all apart and eventually you go, oh yes, no, okay, I get it completely what that means, but why? Why would we? We have other better things to do. So let's move on to our working definition, a baseline. It's a scientific measurement of the behavior before the intervention occurs. It could be how long the behavior lasts, how often it occurs. I'm sure that there are other ways to measure a baseline too, but here's the deal. You have a child and there is a behavior of interest that is concerning, right? Maybe it's that your child, you say to your case manager, you say, my child is tantruming and I can't handle it. I need some help. Help me with the tantrums, right? And one of the first things that's going to come out of that practitioner's mouth, they're going to look at you and your team of therapists and they're going to say, well, let's get a baseline on it. What they're saying is, before we do anything, before we change any of the variables in this behavior, let's see how much it's actually happening because sometimes that's huge information, right? And sometimes that alone can be very informative of, you know, how often it's happening. And sometimes it's different than what we thought, right? That it would be easy for me as a parent to say my child tantrums all the time. Well, because it feels that way. It actually feels that way sometimes. But the truth is that maybe the child is tantruming 50 times in a day. And that's a lot. But it's not constant, right? And we have to have an actual measurement of where we're starting because then we're going to put an intervention in place and we want to see if it's working. And if the child is tantruming 50 times a day, and for some kids that's possible, and we start an intervention and we get, you know, 2 weeks down the road and we see that the child is tantruming 25 times a day, then our life is still challenged. 25 times a day, you're like pulling your hair out, right? But if you're looking to see whether it's working, well, you've cut it in half. Clearly something is working. Yeah, you might want to tweak some things and take more information, but you see that, okay, what we're doing is having an effect on it, which could be lost if you didn't take the baseline, because 25 times a day is still really exhausting. So super important that we take a baseline. A baseline is, what is happening right now before the intervention. We're taking a measurement. So for a tantrum, it could be, if we're saying that there's 50 a day, then it would probably be how many times a day is the child tantruming. But it could also be that the child is having really long tantrums. So you could say, my child tantrums and it lasts a really long time, like half the day. Well, we take the baseline and we see that we take a bunch of different tantrums, not just one, but we take a look and go, the typical tantrum lasts about an hour and 20 minutes. Okay, that's a long, miserable tantrum. That's a lot of energy expended on everybody's part, but especially the child's, right? We start the intervention and we see the child is, still having tantrums, but the tantrums are only lasting 8 minutes. Well, that's a huge, huge improvement, right? So a baseline is that reading of where we're starting before we're going to do the intervention, and it needs to be meaningful, and it may be that the baseline is looking at both the duration and the frequency. Your experts are going to know which one to do, and they can help you if you're trying to figure out which measurement to take. But knowing how often is it happening or how long it's happening or both is going to help you to determine, once you put the intervention into place, is the intervention working? So a baseline is always, one of the first things we want to get before we start intervention. It's really helpful because your mind, especially when you're tired, can play tricks on you. And sometimes it would be easy to go, nope, that's not working. We've done that in our own lives before, right? I personally just did this with Weight Watchers, and I said, that's not working, and I'd lost 10 pounds. You know what I mean? It was working. It's just that sometimes, we get like, it's not working. Well, that's not what the little measurement says, right? Okay, baseline. It's super duper important. That's what they're talking about. They want to get that reading before you start therapy so we can compare, once we've put the intervention in place, is it working? Is the graph moving in the right direction?